Hello everyone, Jeff the Green Review here. Let's talk about algae control in a water garden. By definition, if you do not have any plants in the pond, then you have a water feature like a swimming pool or a fountain, and it's maintained the same way, with chemical weed control. And just like in a swimming pool, no matter how often the chemical sterilizers are added, the algae does come back. Algae is a normal, necessary component of a water garden where we're trying to create an ecosystem and not destroy it. Imagine taking a section of your lawn and stripping off the grass and then just leaving it for a while. You would expect weeds to grow. They have the proper growing conditions of soil nutrients, sunlight, rain, and no competition from good plants. If instead of leaving it alone, imagine you were to take it and make it into a dry land perennial bed. You would plant some annuals, perennials, shrubs, and add some mulch. The first year, you would add some pre-emergent weed killer, and you would still have to do some weeding the second year. There would be less mulch to add and less weeding to do because the perennials and shrubs would be filling in and maturing and getting bigger, covering more area. There will always be a weed or two, but the maintenance drops as the good plants mature and compete with the weeds. If you left all the plants just sitting there in pots, you would not expect them to compete with the weeds. A few annual plants in pots do not compete with the weeds, but are still used because of their beauty. The water garden is nothing more than a wetland perennial bed. It needs plants to grow and mature. The plants will compete with the algae for nutrients and sunshine, but they do not eliminate the algae. It takes time for the good plants to mature. In both the dry land and the wetland flower beds, plants left in pots can look pretty, but do not have root systems that fill out into the surrounding soil or gravel in the wetland, so they do not help much with the competition with the weeds. Aquatic annual plants in pots are still used for their temporary beauty. The larger the variety of plants, the better, so add floating plants, underwater plants, shoreline plants, lilies, and lotus. The aquatic ecosystem also has fish, bacteria, and other organisms thrown into the mix. The fewer fish and the larger the filters, the easier it will be to maintain the whole system. Some varieties of bacteria help eliminate the green water algae. There is a lot of research going on as to how they do this, but for now, there are several brands of bacteria products that do a good job in competing with the algae. And these can be added on a regular basis to the biological filters and directly into the pond. It takes a while for the new pond ecosystems to start out competing the weeds for nutrients. In the meantime, there are several algae control products for backyard ponds. Algae Fix from Aquarium Pharmaceuticals kills all varieties of algae and is safe for fish and plants. It works at all temperatures and is the surest way to control algae in a backyard pond. AccuClear, also from Aquarium Pharmaceuticals, clumps floating algae and dirt together to make it large enough for the filters to clear it out. But it only lasts a day or two. It's good for algae control in ponds with green water, too large to drain and refill the day before a party, for instance. Ultraviolet lights can work on green water algae if they're large enough and have enough water being sent through them. They do not work at all on string algae. Algae controls like these work well for short-term use, but the ecosystem is a better long-term control. You'll have to be patient with algae controls in a pond. Imagine adding a drop of water to a sponge. It does not get the entire sponge wet. The algae population in the pond is just like a sponge. We're trying to get the entire population wet with the algae control product. It will take a few doses to do the trick. Just follow the label directions and continue with the treatments, even when they seem to be slow in working. And then remember, algae is one component of the ecosystem. We're not trying to eliminate it, unless we're trying for a sterile system, like in a fountain. If the pond water starts turning green or growing excessive amounts of long strings of algae, that usually means it's under-filtered, and nature is responding by adding algae, which will complete the filtration process. Create a living ecosystem in the pond by adding plants, sufficient filtration, pumps, beneficial bacteria, and decorative gravel. Installing all of these items should eliminate most green water problems. Having fewer fish, and therefore not adding as much fish food, will reduce the amount of nutrients available for algae to grow. Draining green water and refilling the pond with clear water doesn't fix the problem. So don't try to fix an algae problem by adding an ultraviolet light either to kill algae without first setting up the filters and an ecosystem. String algae is a plant that consumes a lot of nutrients, helping to keep the pond water clear of green water algae. Some fish eat it, so it can be an important part of a pond's ecosystem. Good pond filters and plants are usually all that's needed to reduce the string algae to a tolerable level. There are algae control chemicals that suppress the growth of string algae. Be patient. A pond ecosystem may take several years before string algae is controlled naturally. So what's all this mean to me? Very few pond chemicals are needed with a water garden pond. Water must be dechlorinated before it's safe for fish, but beyond that, a natural ecosystem requires very few additional chemical products. Pond bacteria are an essential part of the pond's ecosystem, so regular additions of pond bacteria products can be used to help keep the pond cleaner. Controlling string algae is the chief exception to the occasional chemical use. So, like I said, Algae Fix is a good one, and there are other brands that work as well. And you use those until your ecosystem is big enough and your plants are large enough to have enough roots that they consume most of the nutrients available. And this is Jeff with the Green Review. Thanks for watching.